our Redeemer. Amen. I never knew the man personally. I never knew him personally. He had died several years before I arrived in Sweetwater to be vicar there and in Colorado City. But I knew his wife. I believe she was probably in her late 70s or early 80s then. I don't really know. I never asked. But in his time, her deceased husband, was a well-respected rancher and community leader. I won't share the name out of respect for the family because for a significant portion of his life, he was also an alcoholic. He thankfully died many years sober, but an alcoholic. She told me sometimes when he was still drinking hard and heavy, she would wake him up early Sunday mornings and drag him to church. And he'd sit there in the pew at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Sweetwater, and she told me he complained, and he'd say, these Episcopal hymns, they're impossible to sing when you're hungover. In vino veritas, I think some of them are impossible to sing when you're stone cold sober. Many times I would go out to their ranch there and walk with her, this woman who became a dear friend. She knew things. She knew things. Names of plants and flowers and grasses and trees. She could show me how the landscape changed due to soil erosion and lack of water. She showed me where their attempts to preserve and nourish the land made a difference. She just knew things. And running all throughout the area closest to their main house, winding around the cottonwood trees alongside the old brick pump house, even over the crest of the hill next to the old family cemetery, there was this stone wall, like the ones you see in Ireland. It came to just above my waist, each stone, all various sizes, but chosen to construct this wall. It was beautiful. It was truly something to behold. And the story is, when he first started getting sober, her husband started to build that wall. Hand by hand. Stone by precious stone. And he never stopped till the day he died. I asked her once, why did he do it? And she said, I asked him that once myself. And he told me, I don't know. I can't figure out if I'm trying to shut something out or keep something in. One time I had a dream. Personally, I don't put a lot of stock in dreams, but every now and again you have one you can't forget. You know what I mean? It sticks with you. Follows you around like a gumshoe detective. You look over your shoulder and it's peering at you from behind a lamppost kind of deal. I dreamed I was walking along that wall at night, one hand running along the side of it, feeling the texture of each stone, the other hand holding out one of those old-timey hurricane oil lamps. And out in front of me were all kinds of animals leaping back and forth over the wall, deer and rabbits and horses, even animals that couldn't possibly leap that high like cows and buffalo. And I wanted to ask her, my dear old friend, what she thought it might mean. But I never did. I don't know why. Maybe I was embarrassed or scared. Maybe all of us sometimes can't figure out if we're trying to shut something out or keep something in. The Pharisees, the ones that came all the way from Jerusalem, made their trek from the big city to challenge Jesus yet again. They had built a wall too, a different kind of wall, but it was a wall. I don't think it started out that way necessarily. I think maybe it even started with this intention to safeguard their way of life in a complicated, turbulent world, all this washing of hands and ways of eating, all the cleanliness and purity rules, they were never about hygiene. They weren't about staying clean. They were these symbolic acts of purity, rituals intended to deepen one's faith, set them apart as a people committed to Yahweh, being the people of God, a light to the nations. There was even a saying, something the rabbis taught from their own literature, words they lived by, words they taught by, words they died by. It went like this: be deliberate in judgment, raise up many disciples, and make a fence around the law. Make a fence around the law. Now, does that sound so bad? Does that sound so bad? Does that sound so awful? Surely we can understand that, right? I mean, what's wrong with being deliberate? What's wrong with discipleship? What's so wrong with boundaries? Making a fence around those traditions and practices that are meaningful. I imagine there's many of us here this morning who could get on board with that. We are, after all, Episcopalian, and I'm sure you've noticed we have a fair share of traditions, customs, and practices that are important to us, and I love that about us. I do. I love that about us Episcopalians. It's one of the reasons I am one. It's one of the things that drew me in as a wayfaring, cynical 20-something. It grounded me. It nourished me. It still does. I love that we have fences around our traditions. I think, to riff off of G.K. Chesterton, it is what allows grace and goodness to run wild. But what happens when the fences become walls? Well, what happens is what we see happening in the Gospel of Mark. There's all kinds of people standing around outside the wall, Gentiles and tax collectors, prostitutes and drunkards, the lost, the last, the least. They're all leaning against the wall, peeking over the edge of it, pressing a listening ear against it, trying to climb over but can't. They're cupping their hands over their mouth saying, "What's going on in there? What are you guys doing in there? Hey, can I be a part of that too?" And all they get in return is the quoting of rules, or, just as worse, a silence as cold and hard as the stones the wall is built with. Until Jesus, who, standing outside the wall with the hungry souls, screams over, echoing the voice of the prophet of old, "Isaiah was right about you. Isaiah was right. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. You care more for your traditions than the people God commanded you to love." And Jesus inaugurated an unruly faith and opened the tables that had been closed off and reminded them of the heart of the law. Even the early church wrestled with this same thing. All of them gathered there in the book of Acts, the Council of Jerusalem, they called it. They were scratching their heads and they were pounding the tables, distraught, confused, discerning leaders going, okay, are we building the fence or are we building the wall? Saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Paul is out there gallivanting around with all those Gentiles, letting them all in, not caring what they eat or how they eat or who they eat with, not caring a lick about circumcision. He can't do that. He's in Galatia. Pretty soon he's going to be in Thessalonica, and then he's going to go to Corinth. And did you hear this? I heard a rumor. Peter ate with some Italians. That's what my grandmother called them, Italians. Jared, why you slick your hair like that? You look like an Italian. Peter was eating with Cornelius and some Italians, slurping noodles, getting marinara sauce all in his beard. But ultimately, they decided, who are we to stop the movement of God. At least for a while. Until fences started becoming walls again. We are really good at finding creative ways to build walls. History holds up example after example, and we can even look around at our current religious and church landscape and see the walls. They're there. Why do you think people build walls? You know, I think it might be too easy, too simplistic to say it's because people are mean. It's because they're mean. That's why they build walls. No, I think people build walls not because they're mean, but because they're scared. It's easy to turn the Pharisees into the big bad meanies of the Gospels, and Mark certainly helps us do that, but they were trying their best. They were trying to help their people. They were trying to be good, trying to offer strength under the crushing weight of a Roman Empire, and over time, they got more and more scared, and without even knowing it, the fence became a wall, and compassion and mercy and justice and love were closed out, forgotten. You know what they called Jesus in the early church? They said he was a stumbling block. They called him a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles, a stumbling block. Maybe for first century Palestinian Jews, Jesus was a stumbling block. But I can't help but wonder, I can't help but ask, if for 21st century American Christians, Jesus might just be a hole in the wall. Or maybe the blocks we've always stumbled on are the ones he's knocked out of our walls. To let the Spirit of God in. To dismantle our walls. To reveal to us the nature of our own hearts. Or at the very least, lead us to ask of ourselves if we're trying to shut something in or keep something out. Amen.